A couple from Georgia was each sentenced to 100 years in prison without parole after adopting a pair of brothers and SAing them for years, all the while recording the proof that led them to their own demise.
Right there, black and white, you're admitting to what's going on. You said, son, that's
picking out their 2 young adopted sons to multiple men.
And now that the court case is finalized, with both men tucked behind bars for life, let's talk about what happened. William and Zachary Zulock seemed like a picture-perfect couple. Having met in 2013, they were inseparable. Zachary worked at SunTrust, a financial institution, as a branch coordinator, while William was in government. To outsiders, they were living the dream. They were financially stable, showcased their idyllic lifestyle and love for each other on social media, and actively campaigned for LGBT rights. After tying the knot in 2017, the duo felt that they were ready for children and were looking into adoption to grow their family. And in March 2018, they welcomed 2 siblings, aged 3 and 5, into their family. All was well, but appearances, as we know, can be deceiving. Underneath the cheerful image of the bright young couple lurked a dark truth that no one around them, not even their closest friends or family, could have ever guessed. In July 2022, a cyber tip was received by the Walton County Sheriff's Office. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation had got a lead worth investigating, and the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force wanted someone to go investigating in person. The information came from a reputable source, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The cyber tip had the sheriff's office spring into action. A piece of evidence, homemade CSAM, had been uploaded from an IP address in the area using a Google account. And when the officers went to investigate after getting a search warrant, they found a suspect, Hunter Lawless. Upon questioning, Lawless admitted to being guilty of collecting illicit material. He had received and viewed CP, and he did give away where he got the photos and videos from, Zach Zulock. Willing to cooperate in the prosecution of the Zulocks, Hunter Lawless explained to the investigators how the perpetrator was filming the videos and making CP with at least one of the young boys living in their home. The sheriff's department, now armed with this new information and some evidence to corroborate Lawless's statement, obtained a search warrant that same night for the Zulock residence, where the partners had been living with 2 young brothers that they had adopted. At 11:30 p.m., they entered the house. What they found was a horrific nightmare. The deputies didn't even have to search extensively to find evidence that the men were engaging in SA acts and video documenting this abuse. According to Sheriff Joe Chapman's press release, numerous pieces of electronic evidence were seized and submitted to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Surveillance cameras from inside the house contained video of approximately 14 days before the DVR was seized. This digital analysis took significant time to go through by the experts with the GBI, since it contained over 7 terabytes of video. The investigators that night interviewed both Zach and William, who both admitted to SAing both boys inside the camera-covered house over a period of time. By the early hours of the following morning, both Zulocks were booked at the Walton County Jail. A thorough analysis found videos of multiple incidents of the defendants committing SA in different parts of the house. Cell phones were analyzed, which contained graphic images and videos, as well as graphic text and social media messages about the SA. Both men were charged with aggravated child exploitation of a child and enticing a child for indecent purposes, with William facing an additional charge of child molestation. As the news broke in August 2022, people were absolutely horrified. So someone who adopted a child used them to record SA? How disgusting. That poor child will probably never trust another adult. Can they be put under the jail? Each of them need to be locked away and abused by Bubba. How awful. I hope they lock them away for a long time. Sickos. The area is very safe, where everyone knows everybody, so for this to happen is a shock to all of us. The community was glad the cops found out before they did. Never stop fighting for rights of children. Since the sheriff's office had first posted the press release with the couple's address, they had to take the post down and re-upload a redacted version. The initial media press release was taken down due to excessive traffic in the former neighborhood of the suspects, out of respect for the non-offending neighbors whose lives shouldn't be disrupted. One of the neighbors explained why they weren't happy. Good. Our neighborhood was filled with news reporters. We had a birthday party outside Saturday, and they stopped and wanted our reaction in the middle of the birthday party. But others wanted the address to be released. You should publish their address. Just like you make their names public information, we should be able to know where not to go and where our children are not safe. Yes, please post these addresses so parents can keep their children far, far away from these homes and cannot be rehabilitated. They ruin lives forever. Oh, there could be a solution. Let's hope and pray the two adults will never live in that house again. And someone poked fun at the situation, posting the county jail's address. I know reading is hard, so all you folks that want to know where these live, here's the address. And somebody called out the adoption agency. There should be some sort of investigation and punishment for this agency that handed these kids over to those two, especially as there was a history there already of child. You're probably wondering, what history? We will get to that in a bit. But first, let's unpack the steps of the adoption process, what it should have looked like versus what happened here. Typically, this involves background checks, home studies, character references, and ongoing evaluations. So, what type of measures are taken to check if the adoptive parents are actually good people? And how did the Zulocks sneak through the cracks? The Zulocks went through a Christian special needs adoption agency called All God's Children, active in Georgia back in 2018. The agency, now defunct, was incorporated in 1997 and specialized in placing children with disabilities or those coming from challenging backgrounds, and worked in partnership with the Georgia Department of Human Services. I had a look into the agency's procedure for adoption, and it worked like this. Applicants had to fill an inquiry form, which the director reviewed, then assigned an adoption caseworker to the family. Then families interested in moving forward went into pre-service training, called Parents as Tender Healers, otherwise known as PATH. In the meantime, the adoption caseworker would meet the family and did a house visit as an assessment. As we know, appearances could be deceiving, and the Zulocks' carefully curated image probably passed with flying colors. All God's Children required a bunch of documentation, including physical exams, drug screens, verification of marriage, proof of income, as well as personal references, and also a thorough criminal background check. Well, these are supposed to catch anything that could signal a risk to the child. But here's the thing. In 2011, Zachary Zulock had been accused of luring a minor to his home and SAing them. While these allegations were looked into, they weren't thoroughly investigated and didn't result in charges, but that's exactly the kind of thing that should raise a red flag. The Zulocks would have then be interviewed further while their assessment was pending, before being matched with kids in need for adoption, and the agency would decide on potential matches depending on compatibility and the needs of children, because being school-aged or special needs would require different skill sets. But all in all, the whole process was described as 8 to 12 weeks, much shorter than the 12 to 24 months it usually takes. So much so that the couple posted this update on their Facebook event for the adoption shower. Exciting news! The adoption process is moving along faster than expected. And how about this other glaring red flag? All God's Children's focus was on the children who waited the longest for families, and that might have contributed to a flawed or rushed procedure. Of course, nobody wants children to wait for years in foster care while waiting for a stable environment, but it just doesn't sound quite right. The adoption process isn't supposed to be easy, and that's a good thing. It's designed to protect kids from exactly this kind of scenario. So when a couple like the Zulocks manages to slip through the cracks, it's a failure of the entire system that they exploited. However, even the people closest to the Zulocks weren't aware of what was going on inside the home, and what Zach and William's real intentions were. Town Hall, a conservative news publication, did a deep dive into the case and obtained text communications between the Zulocks and their friends and family. Some of the messages show how Zach was concerned about the foster care system and how children cannot get the care they need. In July 2020, Zach was ranting about the children's former foster parents. Being a foster parent can change a child's life, good or bad. I think it takes a very special person with a big heart that can be a foster parent. I could never foster because I have a huge heart and I would get attached to the child and would want to adopt them all. And yes, a lot are SA'd, especially in foster care. Some people only foster for the money and don't give a shit about the kids. The boys' foster parents were not bad people. However, they only did it for the money. They never spent time with the boys. They didn't reward good behaviors, and they didn't address bad behaviors. The boys would have terrible days at school and daycare, but we would come over there to do our visit, and they would be watching cartoons on the TV and playing on their tablets. And they were church people, which is fine. I have nothing against that. But it's a problem when the only nice clothes and shoes the boys had were their church clothes. The rest of their clothes probably came with them from their biological home. Son's normal shoes were too small for his feet, but yet he was wearing them every day. Another message read, "To abuse a child, physically, mentally, or sexually, is despicable, and then to kill a child is even worse. Our legal system is so f***ed up." And there were several other instances of Zach ranting about similar situations where children were not in safe environments. In October 2021, it seems like Zach was inquiring about the adoption organization since they were thinking of adopting another child into the family. He reached out to Emily Bailey, the former executive director of All God's Children, through Instagram. "What happened to All God's Children?" Emily responded. "Unfortunately, we had to close. A combination of factors. DFCS stopped all new family visits for months due to COVID. That held up placements. Financially, we just didn't have the resources to be sustainable into the future. On top of that, the state completely changed up the contracting process, which added lots of complication. How are you guys?" Zach said. "I'm so sorry that happened. We are still trying to decide if we want to try and adopt a girl. We are doing awesome. The boys have changed so much from when we first met them. They aren't even the same kids. Older son went from being in an EBD classroom to almost all gifted classes, and he loves school and reading books. Younger son has also excelled too. I just wanted to personally thank you and everyone who was involved in our process. The boys truly changed our lives, and we are so thankful to have a family." So it does seem like not only the Zulocks passed red flag checks, but were outwardly keeping up appearances. Thankfully, though, we have law enforcement agencies working with each other to put a stop to the situation. Going back to the investigation, we have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children tipping the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, who alerts the county sheriff's office detectives to find where the original upload originated from, Hunter Lawless. So how did this guy know the Zulocks? Unfortunately, here's where the information is really grim. According to court documents, Lawless and Zach were introduced virtually through a mutual friend, and Zach then started sharing CP. Lawless also testified that he received numerous Snapchat messages from Zach saying, "I'm going to my son tonight. Stand by," referring to CP that he would make and send later. Lawless also denied meeting the Zulock kids, but claimed Zach had invited him over to meet them multiple times, unlawfully soliciting acts of prostitution. So, when he was caught with the CP material, Lawless admitted he knew who the SA child from the photo was. He was able to tell detectives the child's legal name. Hunter Lawless later pleaded guilty to exploitation of children and was sentenced to 20 years, with the first 12 years in prison. When the county sheriff's office rushed over to the Zulock house after capturing Hunter Lawless, they brought backup from Family and Child Services to secure the children and make sure they were safe when they went after Zach and William. They woke Zach up with their knocking, who opened the door, slamming him on the floor and arresting him. William was still sleeping in bed when they found him, and since he prefers to sleep without clothes on, he was sat at the back of the police cruiser stark naked while the police search went on. And finally, on December 19th, the couple pleaded guilty for their crimes. They were sentenced to 100 years in prison without parole, followed by life on probation. District Attorney Randy McGinley's made a statement saying, "The hard work of law enforcement put an end to the abuse suffered by the victims, and this resolution will help the victims continue their process of healing. William and Zachary Zulock will now spend 100 years in prison without parole. This all but guarantees that the victims will not have to worry as they grow older about their abusers being free. It cannot be stressed enough how important it is for our society to have individuals willing to adopt children in need, but anyone who does so and then abuses those children deserves extremely harsh consequences and decades in prison. The sentence imposed not only appropriately punishes these defendants for their repeated selfish actions, but also sends the message to the public that such actions will never be taken lightly. Those involved with the investigation and prosecution of this case will never forget what they had to see and hear in this case. These two defendants truly created a house of horrors and put their extremely dark desires above everything and everyone else. However, the depth of the defendants' depravity, which is as deep as it gets, is not greater than the resolve of those that fought for justice and the strength of the victims in this case. The resolve I have seen from these two young victims over the last 2 years is truly inspiring. YouTube channel Law and Crime Network reported on the sentencing with a video titled, "Parents S8 Sons They Adopted in House of Horrors."
The dads even installed cameras throughout their family home to capture this ongoing abuse. If that wasn't enough though, they posted the images and videos online so other predators could view these horrifying crimes. We cover a lot of really intense topics here on Law and Crime, and this one is truly one of the more messed up stories I've ever looked at. I mean, we're talking about two young children who are the victims in this story, which unto itself is heartbreaking, but it's an added layer of depravity when we consider that the bad guys in this story are actually the boys' parents. A family's home is supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be a place where the kids can trust their parents and feel at home, but instead, first responders call this a house of horrors. That's a direct quote.
This couple clearly has some sort of fetish that was discussed among their friend circles, apparently, of being attracted to young boys. And so I think that there should have been some red flags in the background check that got missed in this case that should have probably been caught.
Right there, black and white, you're admitting to what's going on. You said, son, he's obviously under 18 years old. So that's basically a confession written right there. Why would this person write that out to their friends and then investigators can now use it against them?
Viewers were horrified about the situation. In other words, they adopted the children with every intent to abuse them. This is sickening. I'm so relieved that those predators got 100 years and will never come out of prison. Those aren't parents. Those are predators who basically bought their victims, and it was all sanctified by the state. The children will suffer the rest of their lives. This is horrible. So glad these men are in jail. The children get another chance at a normal life. I pray for healing in their souls from this trauma. I will never understand why anyone would want to hurt any person, especially children. Some of the audience were critical about the adoption system. They shouldn't have been able to adopt in the first place. Adopted children need to have regular, thorough welfare checks. Whenever the story is about two adults abusing children together, it always blows my mind. How did these two monsters find each other and even discover that they had the same proclivity towards evil? Terrifying. Children need to be more protected, and I hope the adoption agency is investigated. One viewer expressed that they weren't able to adopt. Those poor babies. I burst out crying in my empty home. I am too poor to qualify for adopting. I would have given them the love they deserved. Kids are truly the most valuable beings, and it makes me sick to know that they were being tortured right down the street from me. Others expressed anger towards Zulock's friends who was aware of the situation inside the House of Horrors. Every person that was aware of this and did not report it are accomplices and need to be charged ASAP. The fact that they felt comfortable bragging to their friends about this shows that this has been normalized within their group of friends. All those friends need to be seriously investigated. Some commenters were irritated about the language being used by the YouTube channel, opening up a debate. Don't continue calling them dads, as they weren't ever meant to hold that title. That role is earned by men who would protect children from creatures like those two. Stop saying sons and dads. It's victims and parents. Thank you. These monsters don't deserve the title of dad or parent. Yes, thank you. That was irritating me to want to turn off this channel. Legally, they are sons and dads. You're arguing semantics. Okay, look, if I was the kids, I would not want them to be called my dads. Semantics or not, put yourself in these kids' shoes. I was thinking the exact same thing. Do not call them dads. Do not further abuse these boys by calling them these monster sons. I also wonder how old they were when they adopted them and how long this went on. I haven't seen that reported anywhere. I feel like this is the most disgusting, disturbing, and despicable crime I have ever heard of. It is hard to even hear about it. I feel physically ill. I can't even fathom that this is reality. I think they use certain verbiage to evoke the biggest response from viewers. I also didn't like how their pop-up ad showed up when they were listing out the abuse. It's all showbiz, I guess. It's definitely icky. Some viewers opened up about their own traumatic experiences, empathizing with the children. I was abused at 10 years old. It never leaves you. To say these boys have put it behind them shows a complete lack of understanding. They will need real love and therapy for a long, long time. Bless them. People who never went through this cannot begin to understand, although their empathy, love, and support are a much-needed balm. After 62 years, I remember the smell of the aftershave that preceded him into a room, the deodorant and cherry tobacco on his breath. Truer words were never written. It never leaves you. I was at age 12. I'm 50 now and still remember every detail. These memories stay with you until the day your coffin's lid closes. As a survivor, there's a part of you that breaks. It's like walking with an emotional limp for the rest of your life. I'm so sorry for these boys. My brother and I were adopted at age 5 and 6 in a private adoption by a couple of monsters. There was no checking on backgrounds. They would have seen my dad had a prior CA charge. There were no home visits or anything. He served 30 years for what he did to us. The only difference was we didn't have the internet. We need to stop these unchecked and private adoptions. I was assaulted by my ex-father-in-law. I still tuck the blanket around my feet and make sure they're not exposed, even though he's nowhere near me anymore. I'm 34. What happened to the brothers is unspeakable, and a trauma that they will have to process forever, even with the Zulocks now locked behind bars. What we as a society demand is better protections for children in the system. This brings us to the next question. How do we prevent this from happening again? Adoption agencies need more rigorous vetting processes, yes, but we also need better oversight, external checks, follow-ups, and frankly, accountability for those who let these cases slip through. For more resources on child protection and adoption reform, check the description below. And if you've got thoughts or ideas about how we can improve these systems, drop them in the comments, and please keep the discussion respectful.